Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Girusso, and I serve as Career Services Committee Co-Chair for the Tulane Alumni Association Board of Directors.
And I'm Millie Beth Curry. I'm also on the Tulane Alumni Association Board of Directors, and I co-chair the Career Services Committee with Robin. And on behalf of the Tulane Alumni Association, I thank you so much for joining us online this year for Women Making Waves. And we're really excited about the virtual platform and how it's allowed us to bring these important discussions about women's leadership to alumni around the globe. It's amazing. This year's attendees are not only joining us from the United States, but are also logging in from Australia, the Philippines, London, Malawi, Chile, and China. So we hope you're taking advantage of the platform, and not just from hearing from our speakers, but also to network with alumni who have similar interests and career paths.
We are honored to introduce our speakers for the Pathways to Leadership panel discussion and want to thank each of them for taking the time to share their expertise and experiences with us. Ashley Sheed, who serves on the Newcomb Alumni Association Board of Directors, will moderate today's discussion as we hear from a few of our fellow distinguished alumni. Brittany Dunton from Square, Cindy Mitchell from Millhouse Ventures, and Emily Pillars from PwC. We hope you're motivated by the advice and experience our speakers will share with you on how to rise to leadership positions within your organization and your community. Ashley?
Thanks so much, Robin and Millie Beth, and thank you all for joining us for the Pathways to Leadership panel. My name is Ashley Sheed, and I'll be your moderator and host for today's session. I graduated from Tulane School of Liberal Arts in 2010, where I received my BA in English. I also hold a master's degree in nonprofit management from Columbia University. I'm based in New York City, and I'm currently the Associate Director of Major Gifts at the Cambridge in America, which is the North American fundraising arm for the University of Cambridge. I also proudly serve on the Newcomb Alumni Association Board of Directors. I hope you all got a chance to attend the last Her Stories panel, which was fantastic. This panel will touch on similar topics, but will be a little different in that our discussion will hone in on how specific behaviors, organizations, professional development, and mentorship help pave the way to success in leadership. I have a few prepared questions for our panelists today, but we will leave time for Q&A at the end. Please use the chat and Q&A functions on the Whova app to submit questions and share thoughts with each other. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Brittany Dunton. Brittany is the Global Business Recruiting Lead for the Marketing, Communications, Creative, and Product Marketing teams at Square. Brittany, can you share with us a little bit more about yourself and your career journey?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashley. I currently lead a team of global business recruiters at Square. I went to GW for undergrad, took a few years in between to work at a law firm in New York because I really wanted to be a practicing attorney. And then went to law school at Tulane, graduated in 2013, and practiced for a year before I realized that I did not want to be an attorney, and made a huge career pivot, decided to go try something else, got into legal recruiting, decided that I really enjoyed it. It was fun. I enjoyed talking to people and figuring out what was best for them and their journey and how it better helped the law firm I was working at. Eventually decided to spread my roots and head out west to join a startup. Joined a startup. 4 months later, we did not receive our Series D funding, and I had to lay off an entire company, sell off the assets, and figure out how to move forward from there. I then joined Square and quickly moved up to leading a global business team. In terms of what I currently do, there are 12 people on my team. We work across the globe, and I continue to do executive recruiting at Square as well. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for asking me to be here. Back to you, Ashley.
Thanks, Brittany. Next up, we have Cindy Mitchell, and Cindy is the founding CEO of Millhouse Ventures, the Canberra region's first dedicated social enterprise business development consultancy at the University of Canberra in Australia. So Cindy's joining us from pretty far away. Cindy, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your career story?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashley, for inviting me. Our custom here in Australia is to always begin any public meeting with an acknowledgement. So I'd just like to do that first. I'm coming to you from Australia's national capital, Canberra. These are the unceded sovereign lands of the Ngunnawal people. I acknowledge the Ngunnawal people as the traditional custodians of these lands in an unbroken line for 80,000 years. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and I extend my respects to any First Nations people in our gathering today. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Macon County, Alabama. I spent 4 fantastic years under the oaks at Tulane, Newcomb College. Even though I was really fortunate to have a full academic scholarship and really generous supports, attending Tulane was quite a struggle for me financially. And so when my undergrad finished, I deferred my graduate studies to take a job there in New Orleans. And little did I know then that it would take me 20 years to get back to graduate school. I ended up working for a technology training company, and luckily for me, it was 1999, and a great time to be starting out in the tech sector. And in 2003, I was tapped by that company to come to Australia and lead its new Canberra Centre. I didn't even have a passport at that point. I had never traveled extensively overseas, and I just got here and never really looked back. Eventually, I moved on to a boutique venture capital firm that invested exclusively in ICT businesses. The big career pivot for me was when I started a community social enterprise here in Canberra called No Sweat Fashions. And it was about supporting migrant and refugee women here locally. At this point, I was married and had a young child, and I also worked full-time for the Australian government in the Prime Minister's office. So not a poster girl for work-life balance, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. For the last 5 years, I've worked in a social enterprise advisory firm that I founded called Millhouse Ventures. And here I work with all sorts of unlikely entrepreneurs, men and women with a burning passion for social justice, environmental issues, political and social movements who wish to use the tools of the marketplace, capitalism, to do more than just create profit. And lastly, late last year, I started my PhD, finally got back to graduate school, and I'm studying Australian Indigenous women's leadership. And as a woman of color who's very, very passionate about Black political economy, I'm really proud and excited to be doing this work here in my adopted home alongside amazing women who recognize me as a sister. So back to you, Ashley.
Wow, thank you so much, Cindy. That your story sounds fascinating. I can't wait to talk more about it. Next up, we have Emily Pillars, and she specializes in asset and wealth management at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Emily, could you tell us a little bit more about you and your background?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ashley. So Emily Pillars, I'm an audit partner with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. I graduated from the Freeman School of Business back in 1997 and started my career in our Dallas office. I spent a little bit of time in our national office, which is right outside of New York. And then I came back to California, where I'm originally from, and I've been in the San Francisco office since then. I currently run our financial services audit practice, which is about 200 individuals and about 80 million of revenue. And I'm also the partner champion for our Women's Inclusion Network. I'm also, one thing I'm very passionate about is gender equality. So I sit on the board of directors of Girls Leadership, which is a not-for-profit focused on supporting girls to have the power to exercise their voice through social emotional learning, which has been something that's very interesting in seeing the biases that are embedded in the education system and how that plays itself out just through the life of the children as they proceed. So with that, back to you, Ashley.
All right, thanks so much. I guess it's time to get started. So I think the first question I'm going to, actually, Emily, let's start with you. It sounds like, I mean, all of your careers are just so varied and interesting, and a lot of them have gone through a lot of change too, but can you tell us about someone who has had a strong impact on your career, such as a mentor? Or this is something that a lot of our audience members I think are dying to know about, and in what way did they impact your career?
Definitely. I think some of the best discussions I've had with mentors has been the most uncomfortable. And I say that because the best mentors have always pushed me out of my comfort zone. So when I was a senior manager in Dallas, I had determined I wanted to go to try to be a partner at PwC. And I had a path all laid out of how I was going to accomplish this. And I talked to one of my mentors who pushed me to consider doing a tour in our national office or moving offices. And it was a really uncomfortable discussion because I wasn't really ready for that quite yet. But it really pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And I actually interviewed to go to our national office, and I got the gig, which worked out for me. But it really allowed me to grow in a way that I hadn't thought about. And so as I think about the different mentors that I've had along my career, they're always the ones that you go in with one thing and you come out with something else because they come from a different perspective, or you come out with, okay, I'm going to go in and they're going to agree with pretty much what I've decided. And you leave like, oh my gosh, I have so many things I need to work on, or I need to do, or I need to reach out to. And so if I think about, women that are looking for mentors, don't look for people that look like you, do what you do, act like you, think like you, because then you're just going to continue in that silo. And if you seek out a lot of different perspectives, you can piece together the pieces that make sense, and it'll really broaden your horizon of what potential avenues and opportunities there are out there for you that you might have not thought of before. So back to you, Ashley.
Oh, yeah. Well, Cindy, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, that was amazing, Emily. And I just would like to do a shout out because I did have a particular mentor. Her name is Dr. Margaret King, and she was the director of Newcomb student programs in Newcomb College when I was a student there, and I worked in her office as my work study job. And she saw something in me that I didn't yet see in myself. And so I can really relate to what Emily was saying about being pushed a bit. But Dr. King seemed to really know that if she immersed me in an environment where power and that really normalized women in positions of power and leadership, that I would just open up and blossom. And that's exactly what happened. And how did she impact my life? Well, when I got my first job, when I graduated, I copied her to death. I even went to a secondhand shop in Old Metairie and I bought clothes. I bought my little power suits and twin sets and scarves. She was always so very, very well put together. And my whole thing was I was going to look like a boss until I was the boss. And I have never forgotten her kindness to me, mothering with really. And I have done the same thing for young women throughout my career. And I don't think it's a coincidence that here at Millhouse, all my team are women. I do try to hire men, it just never quite works out. But just like the Newcomb Student Programs office and Dean's office that I worked in, it's all powerful women, and that's what my organization looks like now. And I really attribute that back to Dr. King.
Cindy, I love hearing that also because I'm on the Newcomb Board of Directors, and I also have my first work study job was at Newcomb as well. So I'm really feeling you there, Cindy.
Excellent.
Yes. Brittany, how about you? Anything?
I think that making a pivot, I had some really great attorneys that I looked up to, and then, I had to quickly figure out how to go down a different path and what that looked like. I think that the tech world is interesting. There are a lot of egos, so it's hard to find good people. And I think that I have made myself available to younger folks who are coming up, men and women, within Square, because I want to make sure that there are folks out there who don't have egos in tech. And so that has been a big goal of mine so far. So sad to say I have not had a great mentor, but I'm trying to be a good mentor for others.
All right, so I think, Brittany, because of the sort of pivot that you did in your career, I think this leads really nicely into the next question is could you tell us about, if you had to start your career over, knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently? Yeah.
Yes. So I'm very happy with where I ended up. I'm very proud that I got a JD, that I did practice. I still have an active law license just in case, you never know. So I am proud of where I ended up. If I could start over, I would take much more time in between graduating college and deciding to go to grad school. I would have explored other avenues. I would have tried weird jobs that maybe I hadn't thought of before, just to get, experience in other areas. I was laser focused on becoming an attorney. So to kind of come to a realization that that's not actually what I want to be doing and was not serving my skill set was pretty hard to stomach at the time. So I think I would recommend that if you have the ability to spend the first 5 years of your 20s exploring roles, taking weird jobs, gaining different skills, and then deciding what you really want to do, I think that that's going to be incredibly beneficial as we go into the next 20 years of the workforce.
Yeah, I hear you, Brittany. I took off about 7 years between getting my bachelor's and my master's, not knowing at all where I wanted to end up. But Cindy or Emily, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that? Or we could also move on. Yeah, Cindy.
Yeah, sorry. Look, I took time off mainly for financial reasons because I needed to work for a little bit, but it turned out to be a pretty lucky accident where it ended up, which ended up bringing me to Australia. But the main thing that I would do differently is I would be much nicer. I got my first management job really young, and just as an example, I'd like to tell you about Gina. She was a star member of the operations team that I led. And I just never will forget the day she came into my office and she's like, Cindy, my son's sick and I need to go pick him up from school. And I remember that I had no point of reference for the incursion of this woman's personal life into my workplace. I just remember fuming that I was going to have to stop what I was doing, which I thought was so important to do her job. Now, of course, I didn't tell her any of this, but at 24, I'm sure that she could see it on my face. And I think if anything, I would take time to get to know people. And of course, it wasn't until I was a mom getting the call to leave the office did I come to fully understand. But I think about that moment a lot. I think about the stress that I probably created. And I never remember her asking me again. And, I always think, did she, at that time, did she vow, I would never ask that woman again for time off? And so, yeah, I often think of that. It's been a touchstone whenever I want to get upset about something, to stop and recognize the people that I work with are human beings, and just be kind to her.
Yeah, I love that, Cindy.
I would probably say that I would slow down. I'd have a little more patience. I was very within the big four accounting firms and probably similar, Brittany, in the legal firms, there's a set sort of cadence with promotions. And so it was, I'm an associate, now I'm a senior associate, now I'm a manager, now I'm a senior, like I was going down the path. And I think I would have slowed down a little bit. There's no race to get to the end. I'm not any cooler than the next partner next to me who maybe took a little bit longer or shorter. But I think I would have had a little more patience and done more. I wanted to do a tour abroad. But I chose to keep moving to the next sort of promotion, and very happy I did that, but it would have been a great experience. And I think with those different experiences that might have come with patience, they bring something. You might not have as many years in the role, but there's a lot of just worldly experience that brings in our role as business advisors, understanding the business. A lot of times I think I'm a psychologist navigating what are my clients thinking? Why are they wanting to do this? And a little more patience and doing some of those other things along the way, not being so much in a rush to get to that next leadership role is probably what I would have done if I had to do it again. Back to you.
Okay, so this question is for those who are new to a leadership role. So Cindy, if you could give any advice to someone who is entering a leadership role for the very first time, or maybe they're a new manager, just could you elaborate on that for us?
I think the main thing is to remember that leadership isn't a position to be claimed. It's actually something that is granted to you by the people who agree to follow your lead. That's regardless of what title you have. So you're never there You're always negotiating the terms of your leadership with the people around you. And I would just go back to my point around around kindness, but being respectful of the people that you lead. They are not, passive sheep. They enable you to be where you are. And, I'm at the point in my career now where I think a lot about succession because I'm a CEO. But the way to develop leaders around me is to put myself in the position of a follower. I don't try to have all the answers all the time or direct every process because I have the title of leadership. So it's really just remembering that it's very much a two-way street, and you are there to serve the people around you.
Emily, how about you?
I was going to say I would make sure that you remain authentic to who you are. There's a reason that you're coming into that position. Whomever is the deciding factor, but that allows you to go into that leadership position. Just remember to be authentic, right? With leadership comes visibility. You get to sort of see how the sausage is made. And sometimes with that, there's an ability to pivot and start trying to sell the Kool-Aid. And just remembering when you were on the other side and being more transparent around, here's why we're making some decisions. Here's why we need to do this. I found in my career, in my leadership roles, the more I explain why, the faster people get on board, and they, may not love it, but they understand the purpose of what we're doing. And so I think being authentic and not, sort of losing yourself behind the title is really important.
Brittany?
I would love to add that I think leadership can be the people management aspect of leadership, but it can also take different forms. And something that I actually had a discussion with a mentee of mine yesterday was that she did not want to take on people management. She felt like that was too much stress for her to take on other people's careers and making sure that they were fulfilled. But she asked, where do I go? Like, what is my path if it's not people management? And we talked about how there are high-level individual contributors at Square who are leaders because they set an example, because they work on, extensive projects cross-functionally, because they develop processes that weren't in place before, and that is also a form of leadership. So, I think for me, the idea of leadership has always been people management, but what we're seeing now is much more of that, like, very specialized type of person coming out of this and loving their job. They want to be doing this and they want to be helping others learn how to do this role. But they don't want to take on the stress of it, which is great. And so she is going to move forward being a, high-level IC, and she feels really good about that after that discussion. So, and in terms of actual people management, I think, to echo Emily, remember when you were on the other side. It is very important to just remember everyone has feelings. And especially if you're a new leader, you have recently heard the gripes when you were in their position. So make sure that you're bringing that to the table as well in the back of your mind.
All very sound advice. Brittany, I think we're going to go back to you for this one, because I think just as your role as an executive recruiter, I think you'll have a lot of light to shed on this. But when it comes to those who are out there in the job market right now, who are looking for new roles, when you're looking at candidates, what really makes them stand out?
So one thing that really stands out to me is when people actually read the job description and they're actually qualified for it, and they present a resume that shows that. And what I mean by that is you've read the JD, you have applicable skills, or some applicable skills, and you tailor your resume to that job. The amount of resumes I get that look okay, but they're not speaking to me in the way that I have written the job description, is there are a lot of them. So to stand out, I think one thing is to really tailor your resume to the JD, especially with entry-level roles. Like, mid-level roles, that really helps. It gives the recruiter who's reviewing it the ability to say like, hey, this person meets all 5 of these bullet points that we're looking for. And I think this is a little controversial. I don't particularly love cover letters. I want to get to know you through a phone call or a video interview. But if you do have something important to say, put it on the resume so the recruiter does read it. At Square, obviously, we are driven by our mission of economic empowerment and supporting small businesses. So if you have a tie to a small business, you own a small business, your parents ran one, we want to know that because we want to know that you're tied to our mission. So pointing out the connection that you have to the jobs that you're applying for really does make a difference. In terms of kind of more senior level folks, what we are looking for is the development. Did you take a bunch of fun roles and then start to specialize once you found your groove? That's awesome. We want to see more of that. Did you lockstep as an attorney, associate, senior associate counsel? Great. That shows that you can progress within an organization. We look for all different things, but we really do want to see progression and development of yourself.
Brittany, can I just jump in on the contentious cover letter issue? I use that as a screening tool. So I will always have something in the ad that says, and please include a cover letter that summarizes your qualifications for this position. And inevitably a third or sometimes more of the applications I get don't have a cover letter. So my thing is you can't read or you choose not to follow instructions. So I don't even assess those applications.
And that is totally fair. That is like a phenomenal way to weed people out. I think the benefit of the cover letter, for me, I'm going to hear you if we want to talk. And I also think that it is really important that some folks can't follow directions.
I love that how diverse your answers are. Cindy, I wanted to ask you a similar question because you've really built something from the ground up. What are the type of people that you like to surround yourself around? So sort of similar about the resume thing, but what are you looking for?
Look, I'm looking for people who are able to solve complex problems. So we work with entrepreneurs, and the way to sort of demonstrate that, the best way for me to demonstrate that is someone who spent some time out and had a go. So it doesn't have to have been the most successful business, or it doesn't have to be like the startup that went public, but just the idea that they had an idea that they were willing to take that. They were willing to take that through. So definitely from my team, I look for entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial thinking. So, and that could be demonstrated in different ways. Even if you're inside of an organization, it might be you identified a problem with an existing process in your organization and you came up with a solution. That's the kind of thing I'll ask about in an interview, and I'll see by how they respond, how their body language, how excited they are about. These are people who are problem solvers, and I can work with that skill set.
Emily, what about you? What are you looking for in like an outstanding candidate?
I think ours is a little different because the majority of candidates we hire are coming straight out of college. Obviously, we hire at all levels within the firm, but the majority annually are coming straight out of college. So I think that obviously the ability to read, to Cindy and Brittany's point, and follow the job description is important. I think from our perspective, it's a willingness to learn, a willingness to team. The majority of our work is done in teams, and there's portions of the year that are extremely busy. Right now is the audit busy season, and so a willingness to learn, to grow, to team, in addition to sort of the table stakes of basic accounting knowledge, basic knowledge of Excel and different softwares that we use. But I think it's really it's a real turnoff when you get someone that comes across very arrogant or sort of like almost cold in a way that you're kind of like, you signed up for this interview. Why are you here? Like, what's happening right now? And so it's really those folks that you think, I can take almost anybody that is willing to put forth the time, that's willing to be a part of the team, and I can train them on what we need to do, but there's certain pieces that you just can't train. And it's kind of that attitude, that, unwillingness to learn, unempathetic, kind of go it alone. And there's lots of jobs that are great for those individuals. It's just probably not my job. But I think those would be the main points.
Yeah, so I guess this next question is sort of, I feel like has to do with attitude and the way that you approach work, because the way that work has changed now that we're in sort of this remote landscape, this digital capacity, everything's on Zoom. And I think I'm going to put this back to you, Emily, and then we can go around again. But do you have any advice to us about how to ensure that one's work is getting appropriately noticed? So how are you remotely still moving up within an organization?
No, that's a great question, Ashley. I think it all comes down to communication. I think to make a gross exaggeration, women are horrible at this. You've got to figure out how to toot your own horn. And there's a way to do that is not this in your face, arrogant, look how amazing I am, right? One trick, which I probably shouldn't tell to this whole group because that might come back to hurt me, but is if you seek advice, right? So Ashley, I've been working on this project. I've done boom, 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 boom. What else should I think about as I approach this, right? And so I'm going to get some advice that could actually make it better and it could improve it. But I've also communicated to you everything that I've done, because the problem is more so now than ever, nobody knows what you're doing. And it's only the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. So if you're just sitting at your house or wherever you're working and you're getting your stuff done and you're amazing, but nobody knows, that might not benefit you as much as if people realize how great, like it's quiet because you're just getting everything accomplished, right? And so I think it's figuring out how to communicate that in a way to, whether it's your peers or your bosses or whatever your structure is, so that people are aware and navigating that. I'm not going to be a braggart about what I'm doing, but sort of toot my own horn a little bit of like, here's all the things I have going on. And again, I found an effective way is to seek out advice, because one, I always learn something I could go do and fix and improve, but I've also communicated to you, here's all the things that I'm doing. So hopefully you walk away going, wow, she's doing all this great stuff. And I walk away going, and I have 2 more things I'm going to go do. So that'd be my perspective.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Yeah, everyone, all women out there, we all need to be tooting our own horns. Cindy, what about you? What do you think?
First of all, Emily, that was gold. That was really awesome. I wrote that down. But I also think, asking for advice, but also, how can I make this better? That's another way that you might approach as well. I've had this with my own team. We've been working remotely. And again, I run an all-female team. People just put their head down and get it done. And I had to basically create more time for us to have team meetings and one-on-ones, which had sort of fallen by the wayside during the pandemic and during the remote work time. Fortunately, back here in Australia, we're back in an office together, so we're doing those regular meetings. But definitely making sure that if you have opportunities to do one-on-ones with your supervisor, even if it's just a coffee or a quick catch-up on Zoom, that you're using those opportunities to be visible and to make your work transparent. And so my team, I told that to my team, and they've taken me a little bit too seriously because I've got 50,000 whiteboards, so it feels like, up with their Gantt charts and their progress against things. So they're trying to, demonstrate to me where they are at any given time, and it's actually really good. It's actually helpful for me as a leader. So it's not just about taking your own horn. It's helping overall organizational effectiveness if you are more transparent with your work. But that question, asking for advice, but also, I've done this piece of work. Are there ways that I could make it better? That might be another question or a way to approach it as well.
And Brittany, the same question for you, but I want to also build on it a little bit because of your role in executive recruiting. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people start new roles in this pandemic and in a virtual environment. So what is your advice for those to sort of excel in this? And then also, what's your advice for those starting new roles in this strange space we're in?
Yes. So my advice to my team and what I ask them to do is to create their own hype doc, which is a rolling list of what they're doing. So are they crushing it in terms of hiring folks? Have they contributed to a project that I'm just like, it's not forefront for me? Have they rolled out a project across teams? Like what is their hype doc? And I ask them to put that together, not to give them more work, but so that in a year, when I need to talk to them about their performance, we have a document to point to. I meet with my team one-on-one every week. We also have a team meeting every week. We have a larger team meeting every other week, and a monthly, like all talent meeting. So we have made sure that we're still having that community, that we're all kind of voicing the same things. But one thing I think that when you are starting out, you should have your own hype doc, just demonstrating what you've done. And I think that really helps you especially when you go to have a tough, conversation about performance, feedback, compensation. You want to ask for a raise. Here's all the things that I've done, and here's all the ways that this has contributed. That's really important to me. In terms of starting a new role, I have had 3 people start on my team during the pandemic. Never met them in real life. Hopefully we'll one day meet them. And then we've onboarded tons of people last year. And I think that it's really hard to onboard in a pandemic. You don't necessarily get the culture that you got in the office. But one thing that Square is doing is we're doing a lot of what we call town squares, where the entire company gets together to talk about, what the company is doing, what a subset of the company is doing, what Cash App is doing, to make sure that everyone still feels like we are part of something that's much larger than just our teams. The hardest part is to put yourself out there and make sure that you're meeting the right people. For my team, I set up all the, in my opinion, most important meetings for them for their first 3-4 weeks. I then also have a list of people that are kind of nice to haves. And so I would recommend that if you are starting a role in a pandemic, or if you are starting remotely, because you work remotely forever, to ask for a list of people that are nice to haves in your back pocket, so that when you have a little bit of downtime, you can book a meeting with them. Just introduce yourself. It's really hard to do an introduction with someone that you don't know when you're brand new, but forcing yourself to put yourself out there and build friendly faces, so that when you are on a giant Zoom call, you can say, oh, I do know that person, and then eventually see them in the office, hopefully.
Hopefully one day. I've had a number of people start on my team too remotely, and it's been a whirlwind, right?
Can I comment real quick on, I love that name, Hype Doc, Brittany. I used to just say keep a bullet list, which sounds way less cool. So I'm going to copy that. But I would say everybody should have a Hype Doc every year, all the time, because there's so many things you do. And especially in the pandemic, where it's a little bit of Groundhog Day, right? You don't remember what you did last month. But if you keep a rolling list, it helps you remember, and then put everything on there, because you never know. I've had lots of instances where something that someone thought this was so helpful would have been at the bottom of my list of things that I thought were impactful to them. And so put them on. And when you're having those conversations on compensation or performance, or you're getting an evaluation, you can send it as a helpful thing. It's really helpful to me when my direct reports send me, here's my evaluation, and here's just a reminder of some things I've worked on. It's extremely helpful as a reminder. I would caution, don't make it a novel, because if it's more than like 2 pages, I'm sorry, I'm gonna not read it. But if it's bullet points, here was what I've done, it helps remember. And to Brittany's point, it frames that conversation. And it's especially helpful in situations where, again, more often women don't do this as much. You don't feel like you can go talk about all the great things you've done. But if you just sort of say, here's the things I've worked on this year, and you put it on the list, it's sort of there, and it takes away some of that pressure or uncomfortableness.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I was able to do during the pandemic, I had more junior female employee join my team, and she had a very specific skill set that not a lot of people on my team had. So she taught our team that skill set. And then she was able to roll that out to a slightly larger team. And she kept that on the top of her list on her hype doc. And I, a month later was like, hey, do you want to roll that out to the larger team? And so she got to kind of be the voice of this project that I don't think she would have been if she hadn't kept that on her hype doc. So she got a lot of visibility across our org, and I was really proud of her for taking that on. And that's something that people now think of, when they think of her, that comes top of mind. And I think that taking those chances and those opportunities as women especially is really important right now.
We have about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to take a few questions that we've gotten from the audience. And so whoever wants to answer them can just answer. All right, so the first question is about mentorship again, but it's a little bit different. So mentorship is usually viewed as something that older or more experienced leaders provide. How can we recognize and seek mentorship from our younger or less experienced colleagues who may offer a fresher perspective?
I would say you just ask. At least at Square, we're very open about even if it's not a defined mentorship program, we have folks who just started meeting with each other and really enjoyed that friendship and that bond. And now they go to each other, not in any official way, but I think just starting to have those intro conversations, asking people about themselves and developing a relationship with someone that you're just interested in knowing a little bit more is the path to do that. And that doesn't have to be someone who's super senior. That can be someone who's, one level above you. And, again, it comes down to putting yourself out there a little bit, but it will come back tenfold.
And Brittany, that's such great points. And for me, mentorship is always meant to be a reciprocal relationship. So it's not like me sort of coming in and, bringing the young woman up alongside me. And like, it really is about genuine friendships and genuine, caring about their future. But I put myself often in the position of the mentee, saying, hey, what do you think about this? And I think just sort of modeling this sort of behavior, and that's part of what mentoring is. So yeah, I definitely see the point around making sure that you're bringing in the perspective of younger colleagues, and that's, for me, that's what the mentoring relationship is. What I personally get out of it.
I think there's so many different terms that you can use, right? There's mentor, there's sponsor, there's network, there's teaming, and I think when you're specifically going to say younger or less tenured individuals, I think of it more as teaming or just building my network. And, the concept of, I think Brittany mentioned, like almost just developing a friendship and then an openness to learn. So they might be, if I'm the partner and they're, say, a younger staff, they might be seeing it as a mentor, and I might be learning, this actually happened like whenever Venmo came out. I might be learning how to put Venmo on my phone because I didn't know how to do that. And so they're learning tips on how to move up in the organization, and I'm getting tech savvy, right? So I think if you don't put a label on it sometimes and you just let that relationship foster and you're open to learning, then it kind of builds on its own. I would point out, we commented about this earlier, just the subtle difference in sponsor versus mentor and how you use those different roles. So a sponsor is more someone who, let's say, when you're not around, is pushing your name for opportunities, for development, for different things. And the mentor is the person you go to that gives you coaching and guidance and development. And it's good to have both. Sometimes you don't know who your sponsor is, or you might not know who's sponsoring you out there, or someone might be sponsoring you that you don't even realize. But it is important to kind of be aware of the subtle difference between those two as you move through your career, because they do serve different roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the power of a cup of coffee, right, with your teammates, it's huge. So the next question we have from the audience is, do you think it is possible to be a good leader, a fair boss or partner, and profitable at the same time? Is it hard to make a profit but still be a kind human? Whoever wants to take that question. Cindy, do you want to take a stab at it?
Oh, look, that's what I do, right? So I work in social enterprise, and we're trying to change the nature of capitalism so that profit is not just about the acquisition of individual personal wealth, but also the creation of public benefits. So, social, economic, environmental, cultural things. And in my world, we are bending capitalism that way. And certainly, I think people who are coming out of university now going into the business world will find a very different way that business is being done. So I like to think it has to do with the vanguard, with the change makers that I work with who are at the leading edge, changing the nature of organizations, but it's also happening in mainstream organizations as well. There is actual, most companies now have more than just have triple bottom line. They're thinking about, even if it is just for reputational reasons, corporate social responsibility is huge now. So yes, I think it is about trying to do things in a way, yes, if you're working for a listed company or a company with shareholders, yes, profit is still the main thing, but it's how you get there. And there are lots of choices now in terms of what sort of organization you want to be part of. And if you find yourself in an organization that's not consistent with your values, then my advice to you is move on, because there are places that you can go where you don't have to necessarily sacrifice yourself and still make a good living and still be able to rise, still progress in the organization. And that's the change that's happening globally from my perspective.
All right, so the next question we have is, have you experienced imposter syndrome in your career? And if so, what have you done to overcome or challenge that?
So I'll take that. Yes, I have experienced that. In true imposter syndrome, where I'm not really ready to be in a position I'm in, and also where I didn't think I was, but I actually was. But I sort of approached it as a fake it till you make it. Now I'll caution, you have to be careful because there's some things that fake it till you make it doesn't work. Like if you're a surgeon, please don't do that. But I think that the way I sort of approached it was, I tried to prepare myself as much as I possibly could. And then I would go, and mine would usually be going into some new client or some new transaction that I'd never dealt with before. And I would come at it from sort of a learning perspective, right? So, Ashley, that's a great question. I haven't thought about it that way. Let me look into some things and I'm going to come back to you. Because I found more often than not, from my experience, people don't need the answer right now, but they need the right answer fairly soon. So if I can at least buy enough time, ask enough questions with, those are great questions. That's a different way than I was thinking about it. Let me see what we can look into. And then I can go back and do my research, reach out to my network, try to figure it out, and come back. It's usually been enough to kind of navigate. But I've also found that oftentimes you don't think you can do something and then you get into it and you're like, okay, I can actually do this. I'm prepared for this. And so there's sometimes a little bit of the self-doubt that's in there that we might think is imposter syndrome. It's just a little bit of self-doubt.
All right, we have only 10 more minutes left. So there are two questions, which I think we can get to pretty quickly. One is really quick and it's for Brittany at the end. It's about the hype dog. People are really excited about it. But so the question is resilience a skill you acquire by nature, by nurture, or both? And this question, I think we could go on probably for a really long time, but if anyone has just a short answer about nature, nurture, and resilience.
I don't want to be the only one talking, but my short answer would be it's both. It's a little bit of attitude. You have to have a positive attitude and a little bit of optimism that you're going to keep going through whatever, trip and fall or foot fault that you're in. And then there's, which is the nature part. And then the nurture part would be, you've got to feel like you've got a network or a support group or a team that you can get through it. You can survive this. I know I'm an auditor, but we joke like nobody dies in our profession. So we're gonna navigate through this. Like it's gonna be okay. And when you're in the midst of it, everything always seems like, really big and monumental. But I think that if you sort of just come at it with, okay, we're gonna figure this out. It's gonna be okay. We're gonna navigate through, pull in whatever resources you can. It's a little bit of both, as far as attitude and approach, and then nurture just with experience and knowing that we'll figure it out. We'll navigate to the other side, whatever that is.
Look, I think that both of those questions, those two questions that you asked, they actually have something in common. And thinking about the way Emily has answered them, both of the things is really about networks and about social capital, and thinking about, well, who are the people in your life who are around you? So, yes, we're talking about our close people, our families, but also our friends, our professional colleagues, our mentors, our extended sort of community. And I think that the extent to which you're always tending those things as well, and making sure that you've got a strong network, that's going to help both with the imposter syndrome as well as the inevitable knocks and travails that you're going to get in work in times when you're going to need resilience. So I think just recognizing that no woman is an island, and we really need to make sure that we're taking the time to be authentic and cultivate friendships and actually have people get to know us so that they can and be willing to ask for help when you need it.
I think that resilience, I agree wholeheartedly with Cindy and Emily. I think resilience is a mix of both. And I think tying it to, I agree also with Cindy that, the imposter syndrome and the resilience is somewhat tied together. The resilience piece, you have to have a good network in order to break through if it's not natural to you. And if you don't have that network, you need to go find it elsewhere. Or you need to find a new company that will support you. And I wanted to touch on this a bit. I have experienced imposter syndrome, even just being on this panel. Who am I to be here with these two wonderful women? But, in talking to friends, coworkers, my lead, they were like, who are you not to be on this panel? So again, tapping back to that network, understanding that you have to have people who support you and can point out that you do deserve certain things and that you have made certain achievements, so that it's not just solely focused on you at all times. But I think that the big thing about imposter syndrome, Square does a lot of, leadership trainings, and imposter syndrome has been one that's been really popular lately, is that you need to identify your imposter and then be able to speak to them, is what I've learned. So you actually give them an identity and then tell them, like, it's lovely to meet you. You're going to need to leave now. So that when you are by yourself and you don't have that network, you are able to pull yourself up a little bit and give yourself a little bit of that space to feel confident. I hope that someone takes that advice and runs with it. But, I want to make sure that everyone is also finding their networks too.
Yeah, I love that, Brittany. Who is talking to your imposter, giving him a name? I think it's a him. So this is very quickly. Is the Hype Doc, is it a spreadsheet? Is it a Word doc? Is it a PowerPoint? What's the format? People are dying to know.
I think to Emily's point, it can be a bulleted list. It can be, at my team, we use Google Sheets. And so they have one sheet that is like all the roles they've filled, time to fill, level. It's like pretty built out. We have another sheet that's projects that they've worked on, and another sheet that's hidden work. So is that, mentoring new teammates? Is that mentoring teammates on another team that I don't know about? Is that working extensively with the comp team on some, kind of hidden issue that solves something for everyone else? It depends on what industry you're in and how you work with your lead. So if you're in marketing and you want to do a PowerPoint presentation of all of the brand campaigns that you've done, maybe that's more appropriate. For me, it's a Google spreadsheet so that we can kind of see everything easily. I think when I was an attorney, it was a bulleted list of cases and motions that I wrote and, people that I helped. So it depends on your industry.
Well, if anyone, does anyone have any final thoughts before we wrap things up? We are just about out of time. Okay, well, I just want to say thank you so much to Emily, Cindy, and Brittany for taking your time with us today for the Pathways to Leadership panel. I know I've learned a lot. I hope everyone else here has learned a lot. I know that after this, we're all going to be putting together hype docs, everything we've done in the pandemic. We're all going to be reaching out to our colleagues for coffee after this. But yeah, so just thank you so much. And so remember that you can continue the discussion throughout the evening using the discussion groups on Whova. This is the app that we're all using. We also recommend you join the Women Making Waves interest group on tulane.edu. Okay, thanks so much. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference and enjoy.
Thanks. Thank you.